Hey folks, it's Andrew from Gemba Red, and today we are reviewing another affordable red light therapy intensity and wavelength measurement device. Now the one on the left is the $700 spectroradiometer, which is an amazing price for a spectroradiometer, and it's the HopooColor HPCS-330Pro. And you might recognize the one on the right is a $2,200 spectroradiometer that many brands and influencers have been using for red light therapy for years. And it's manufactured by the same brand, but it's the OHSP-350SF model. But you can see here from the display, the functionality is very similar. You can measure the intensity in milliwatts per centimeter squared in both, and they tell you the spectral distribution, which you can download and, really analyze the peaks in the spectrum if you really want. Except the cheaper one is a bit smaller. It's made out of plastic and it's got a smaller screen, so that's where you get the significant savings on price. But according to their spec sheet and some of the warnings they told me is that the cheaper one might have a little bit more margin for error on the percentage bars for milliwatts per centimeter squared or plus or minuses on the nanometers. But overall, I've been testing it out and it looks like a very close match to the more expensive one. And so as an example, I took a measurement with the RL Pro 300 from Shenzhen Idealite at 24 inches away, and we got very similar intensity numbers, about 29 milliwatts per centimeter squared for both of them. But I did notice that the nanometer peaks on the cheaper one is about 3 to 4 nanometers higher than the more expensive one. So like for this one, it's reading 809.9, but on the more expensive one, it's reading 804.8. But we don't know for sure which one is actually more accurate than the other. This one's a little bit older, so there could be some calibration drift over time. This one's a little bit newer, so it's got a fresher calibration. So it could be either one. We can't assume the more expensive one is always more accurate. What we can do is measure it against some third-party tested panels that I have and see which one matches more closely to the peaks that I get from my third-party lab reports. And so that's when I went through, I measured the wavelength offsets from various different devices and see what the difference is that we can expect. So for example, I just measured the orange LED from this panel that I have third-party measurements for, so I know the peak is about 632. But we can see the new one's higher than the old one, but the new one's actually closer because it's measuring 633, so it's only high by only 1 nanometer, as opposed to the older one is low by about 2 nanometers. So I've actually done a bunch of testing. I'll just put it on the screen now. That it's very consistent pattern that this one's actually closer. It's just high by 1 nanometer compared to third-party measurements, and this one's on average low by about 2 nanometers. So like I said, that could be just calibration drift, that this one's newer and this one's older, so it could be a little bit of calibration drift, or it could just be manufacturing variability, and that's what they kind of warned me of. Like if you buy one of these, it might have a little bit of different variability, but it looks like it's very accurate right now, so I wouldn't be worried about, lot to lot variation or product to product variation. So it's actually remarkable that the cheaper one, the $700 one, is measuring more accurately, especially with the peaks compared to our third-party tests, that this one's more accurate. It's just high by 1 nanometer as opposed to the more expensive one, and maybe it's just because it's older and it's trying to drift out of calibration, but the older one is low by about 2 nanometers. So that's one thing you have to worry about is if you have in-house measurements, you have to make sure your devices are up to the latest calibration. Usually they recommend 1 or 2 years to get them recalibrated just to make sure they haven't drifted. And so if you're a red light therapy influencer and you've been using the same device for 5 or 6 years, you might have to start to worry about calibration drift. And so that's why I still send my products out to get third-party tested, because I know they keep their measurement devices routinely calibrated. And these I just use for in-house prototyping and development and for the social media aspect. So one of the amazing things is that it's hard to find a spectrometer. A spectrometer is a device that only measures wavelengths in the relative spectrum. It can't measure the absolute intensity, but just to get a spectrometer that reads into the near infrared is very hard to find. But this one does both. It does a spectrometer and the intensity, so that's why it's called a spectroradiometer. But there's one other limitation, is that the cheap one only goes up to 1,000 nanometers, which again is very good. It should cover the vast majority of devices on the market, but you can get the more expensive one up to 1,100 nanometers. So if you really need to measure those 1050s, 1060s, 1070s, then this one you'd have to pay a lot more if you want that extra range. So there's one inconvenience with the cheaper one is that the sensor is facing up like this, like maybe it's designed to measure grow lights or overhead architectural lights. So what I do is the measurement button is on the side here, so I just kind of flip it around, take the measurement, wait for it to beep, and then you've got your new measurement. Or it seemed like they knew that this was a potential problem, so they made it detachable, and they're connected by Bluetooth, so now I can just flip this around, and we can take measurements in real time. Or we can set this up on its own little stand while I take measurements separately. So as red light therapy becomes more accessible and affordable, we also want accurate measurement tools so we can do it scientifically and safely and effectively. And remember, if you just want to measure intensity affordably, you can get a solar power meter and then use one of my correction calculators on my website, or you can use the VBR device that I reviewed earlier this year, and those usually run about $70 to $100. So if you just need intensity, that's a lot cheaper. And so now's the best time to become a red light therapy influencer. You can get a $700 Spectra radiometer and start doing reviews online. So that's all I had for today. Thanks for tuning in.